So I've been super confused as to why I don't see nationwide protest about this recent file drop, the Epstein files. There's been two huge drops, millions of documents released, and some insanely concerning information dropped in those. And there's widespread public outrage online on the internet, but there's nothing happening in the real world. I don't see any promotions for protests. I don't see anyone saying, hey, let's protest on this date. Hey, on this date, come the fuck out and we're protesting nationwide. I don't see that. So I wanted to research why there's no protest, and it got me thinking about the money behind protests, the hidden cost of protesting. So I just did a bunch of research yesterday. I did about 8 hours of research. I made a little short about it, and I wanted to make a little long form video going over the full scope of the research that I found and the article that I condensed all the research into. And it's on societalnews.com. It's called The Hidden Funding Behind America's Major Protests. So let's get the fuck into it. What I found is something that we all kind of believe, which is protests often appear as spontaneous, as grassroots. They appear as like, hey, we're just getting together and we're getting the message out. But in actuality, it is so hard to build something. So much money goes behind the scenes in these protests. There's a lot of talk about people being paid to protest, but that's not the case. That's not what I found. Or there's no public data on that, not a lot of whistleblowers on that. I'm sure there's some protests where people were paid to be there. And if you are one of those, I would love to talk to you. I would love to talk to you anonymously about how you were contacted, how you were hired, and how you were paid. I digress from that. There's some really interesting stuff that I found that I'll get to at the end of the video. But at first, let's cover the hidden cost of protesting, which is the planning process, the promotion process, and the logistics. There's permits, there's buses, there's police security that you have to pay for in order to protest. There's permits that you have to get in order to protest. So there's a lot of money going on behind the scenes. No one talks about it. No one discloses it. These protesters don't say, hey, we're funded by this. We're funded by X, Y, and Z Corp. We're funded by this nonprofit. So I just touched on it, but I'll kind of work my way through this article with you guys. Nearly all individual participants march without direct payment and are motivated by real issues, by real grievances, by real feelings and emotions behind these protests. But the infrastructure to have a large scale nationwide protest in order to reach hundreds of thousands or millions of people often involves substantial financial investment. And I'm sure a lot of people can attest to this. Like anyone who's ever built anything or tried to become an entrepreneur or start something knows that the building of it, the programming of it, the making of the website, the writing the articles is kind of the easy part. It's actually not easy. Everything's hard because like with my Societal News website, I spent 2 months building it out. I've spent months researching and writing articles. I've spent so many hours working for free, and you put it up there and you go, it's live. And then no one sees it. At first, no one sees it. You have to build an audience. And building an audience is the most costly, most time dependent. The hardest part of the process is getting customers, is building an audience. And I'm sure anyone who's ever built anything can attest to that. Like especially right now, I see on X a lot of people vibe coding, a lot of people making apps, a lot of people making websites. And some of these projects are really freaking cool. Some of these projects are awesome. And you'll see these entrepreneurs, these programmers talk about like, hey, my product is live. It's been live 6 months and I've redone the site and redone the app 4 or 5 times and I have no customers. I just launched on the App Store and then crickets. You have no customers, nothing. So all the money goes into ads. That's why advertisements on all social media platforms bring in billions of dollars. Advertisements internationally bring in hundreds of billions of dollars. All these people drop shipping. They run ads on their shirts, on their merchandise in order to get customers, which cuts into their profit margin. And the hope for that is to build enough customers that you have returning customers so you can stop running ads so you can eventually be profitable. And it's really hard. Entrepreneurship is 100% worth it, but it is very hard to build your customer base. And that's why these protests needs millions to hundreds of millions of dollars in order to get people to come together and protest. Do you know how hard it is to get 10 people over to your house for a cookout, to get their schedules to align. Now imagine having a multi-day protest nationwide with hundreds of thousands of people. So let's get into it. A lot of these protests comes from funding from billionaires and their foundations, frequently channeled through different nonprofits and dark money networks that obscure identities. So dark money networks are networks where large amounts of monies donated from wealthy individuals, corporations, foundations are funneled into influencing elections, public policy, protests, and social causes without publicly disclosing the original donor's identity. So that's how most of these protests are funded. There's times where there are disclosures from corporations on what they funded and how they funded it, but it's oftentimes like far out. Like they'll donate something in the next year, or 4 quarters later is when they have to disclose what they donate. An example of this is the October 2025 No Kings protest. It's one of the last protests that I remember being a huge nationwide protest, and it was over Trump saying he was a king, basically. Those protests were funded by George Soros's Open Society Foundation, which gave $7.6 million to Indivisible, a company that owns multiple nonprofits and PACs that donate to politicians. Indivisible created the No Kings protest and like planned it and organized the No Kings protest. Open Society also gave another $3 million grant to Indivisible in supported coordination of the No Kings protest. The No Kings protest also involved 200 other groups that were allied in this cause, and it drew millions of participants across thousands of events nationwide. A couple other major donors of the No Kings protests included the Heizorg Weiss linked networks, and they transferred over $293 million to progressive similar causes. There's also the Arabella Advisors ecosystem, the Tides Foundation, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, and the Ford Foundation. And in some cases, taxpayer money flowed directly into protest related activities. Like in California, the Chirela, CHIRLA, which is the Coalition for Human Immigrant Rights, had a grant of $100 million. Some of that money went to anti ICE protests. Now, that's on the left leaning side of things. I'm going to touch on the right leaning side of things as well, because I don't like party politics. I'm not a party politics guy. I cover both sides. I really like to cover global conflicts and stay out of politics in general, but this is very important and dear to my heart because of how disgusting and gross the Epstein Files release is. There needs to be nationwide protests. Millions of people need to be protesting this, need to be communicating with their congressmen, need to be in Washington, D.C., need to be protesting in D.C. peacefully with permits, like legally, all the right ways, need to legally, peacefully be protesting in DC on this disgusting release and revelation of what the elites of our society are doing internationally and in Washington, D.C. Because I touched on a left leaning side of the aisle protest, let's touch on January 6th. It was organized by groups like Women for America, which received $3 million in dark money, money that you don't know where it came from, for the Stop the Steal event, the Stop the Steal protest. Turning Point Action raised $11.2 million from 2 anonymous 7-figure donations that helped promote the January 6th rally. Super PACs like Preserve America, backed by Sheldon Allison's $90 million donation. Also, America First Action, funded by sugar companies like Fanja Corp, which gave $725,000. Vital Pharmaceuticals at $250,000 supported Trump allies involved in the planning and promotion of January 6th. There was also a lot of post-event corporations that donated $10 million plus to a sedition caucus, which I'm not really sure what that was about, but it was like a caucus to help the people that were arrested. Boeing, Koch Industries, General Dynamics all donated 100,000 plus to this event. You also have the 2020 BLM protest, which raised $90 million. And actually, I think they raised more. They say a lot of this funding was from small donations, which I believe, but also the Open Society Foundation committed $220 million post George Floyd to BLM. And not just to BLM, but also to aligned efforts like Equal Justice Initiative. The Tide Foundations partnered with BLM and received millions from Soros-linked sources. Operating expenses include $8.4 million for staff, consultants, promotion, $37.7 million dispersed in grants to Who knows? What's interesting is you'll see similar nonprofits, NGOs, foundations that are left leaning that support left leaning protest promotion and right leaning that support right leaning protest promotion. It's kind of the same names that keep popping up over and over again. Like, for example, the pro Palestine campus protests in 2023 and 2025 received millions through the Tides Foundation, which just touched on giving money to BLM. Also, Weiss Networks. You see the same names popping up with anti ICE and anti deportation rallies. And I know some people are going to say I'm left leaning or right leaning. I'm neither. I'm neither. I genuinely am neither. The elites, the politicians are all compromised. They're all on the same side. It's the elites and us. It is genuinely the elites and us. There is no middle class. It's the elites and the slaves. So let's go over some of the actual costs where this money goes when these organizations are funding protest. I believe there's some big numbers being thrown around. It seems like they are also laundering some money through these protests as well, like the $220 million to BLM. BLM didn't receive all that. It went to some of it went to BLM, but some of it went to other organizations that were aligned. So some people are making millions off these protests. So a lot of this money goes to promoting the protests. Like I've said, it goes to digital advertising and social media boosts. Some of it goes to payments directly to influencers to run promotional campaigns, which reported $500 to $8,000 per post is what they're paying social media influencers to promote these protests, which is like insane. Logistics such as buses, permits, staging, security run from $10,000 to $500,000 per major gathering. Planning the protest, staff salaries, which is probably some of the money laundering. Legal support frequently costs $50,000 to more than $1 million. So they also, some of these, like BLM has a bond program where they paid some people's bonds. And what this funding touches on is there is real public sentiment behind these protests. There are real feelings and emotions behind these protests. Hey, buddy. But you need money in order to make these protests popular, to make them popular enough for people to show up. But at the same time, the fact that a lot of these funders and donors are hidden sparks the conversation about external influence, about the authenticity of these protests, about how there needs to be greater transparency. Like, if some of this money is dark money, is this coming from the Saudis? Is this coming from the Chinese? Is this coming from Russia? The person that donated that money, the billionaire that donated it, was it actually his money, or is he being paid to donate that money into this? So there's a lot going on there behind the scenes with the money. I also made a list of all the major protests and all the funding amounts that I could find, and we can go through them, or I can just throw them up on the screen. Let's touch on a couple of them. I already touched on No Kings, Black Lives Matter, and January 6th. Let's look at Project 2025, which I didn't even think was a nationwide protest, but it was some sort of protest where the Heritage Foundation kind of funded it through a gift of $25 million. Someone just gave them $25 million. Also, Christian right groups, I'm not sure what they are, but they spent $280 million globally on Project 2025, with $90 million in Europe. There was also the Hewlett Foundation, which spent about $2 million on it. And then you have these election denial and anti-voting rights efforts from 2020 to 2022, which apparently foundations funneled $1 billion to 155 organizations pushing for voter restrictions, purges, and denialism of the election, controlling over $7 billion in assets. Some of these firms include Texas Public Policy Foundation, which had 8.6 million, including 1.4 million from Charles Koch Foundation for Election Protection Project. Public Interest Legal Foundation, $3.7 million budget for voter purges. Donors include the Bradley Foundation, Serial Freedom Trust, Sarah Scaff Foundation, donor advised funds like Donor Trust. And then let's touch on some of the climate change protests. A lot of the climate protests were backed by Climate Emergency Fund, founded by Alan Getty and Harris to an oil tycoon. Dispersed millions to Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil for organizers and actions. Also funded by the Rockefeller Brothers Fund and Ford Foundation, supported broader climber networks and and restrictions. The Getty family provided donations of $1 million plus to a climate emergency fund, enabling disruptive civil disobedience and salaries for organizers and logistics. So a lot of money is being thrown around to these funds, to these foundations, to these NGOs that plan and promote protest. It doesn't seem like you need $220 million, though. It doesn't seem like you need $90 million. I mean, with BLM, there was actual fraud going on, like actual reported fraud on where the founders bought huge mansions with the money. And I'm sure that goes for both sides. I'm sure on for January 6th, a lot of that money disappeared or went to people's salaries. So both sides are super corrupt. Both sides, there's more to every nationwide protest behind the scenes than we know, than what's being reported on in the news. And it's not the fact that, oh, these people are being paid to show up. No, people freaking care. There are real problems in this world not being addressed, and the only thing us can do, we, not the elites, the only thing we can do is show up and protest. If we try to do anything else, we'll be arrested. We need to unite. There are more of us than there are them. We need to protest this file. So I tried to deduce what a nationwide protest costs. And for a smaller or single day coordinated event across multiple cities, it typically costs between minimum $500,000 to $5 million, which covers promotion, logistics, and basic organizing. For a larger sustained nationwide protest, it costs 10 million to 100 million or more. And this goes to operations, staff, digital advertising, influencer outreach, buses, permits, legal aid, bail funds. Like, there's a lot going on here. So a rough midpoint for a nationwide protest drawing hundreds of thousands to millions of participants across dozens or hundreds of cities would be 5 million to 50 million, depending on how passionate people are to get out and protest. You have to think it's a big ask to say, hey, take off work for a week and come to DC and protest. That is a huge ask, and to get hundreds of thousands of people to do it, you have to show them ads, you have to get them riled up, you have to pay podcasters to promote it, you have to pay right-wing podcasters to promote it, left-wing podcasters to say, hey, we're protesting, this is big. And those podcasters aren't disclosing that they're being paid $8,000 minimum. I'm sure for a podcast, they're being paid a lot more to promote certain protests. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that's super sketchy and super corrupt. So we need to stand up and take action. There's no action going on. There's just people talking about emails. That's not going to do anything. That they want you to stay at home. They want you to film a cute little video of you saying, look at this super insane email where they're talking about eating children, where they're talking about walking beef jerky to the house, where they're saying, out of beef jerky, can you get me more pizza and grape soda? That's something that's been popping up for like 10 years since the original Pizzagate. What are we doing? And the reason that I've deduced that you're not seeing nationwide protests is because these protests are funded by billionaires, and these billionaires don't want us protesting because they're all implicated in the files. They all went to these parties. They all would be considered like co-conspirators if they were hanging out at parties where human trafficking was going on and they were aware of it. They're all liable, and that's why you're not seeing protest. And I'll just reiterate this again. I am advocating for peaceful, permitted, legal protesting about this disgusting disgrace revelation that we're all having with these file drops. I am purely advocating for peace and nothing more.